So today we have with us a gentleman with some really, really interesting information, and in conversations that I've been having with him leading up to this particular conversation, boy, it's been a real eye opener. And the gentleman's name is Mal Buchanan. His business is called Safe and Sound Estate. Hi, Mal. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Mal, perhaps if I can ask you to just give us just a little bit of an overview in terms of your background and what Safe and Sound Estate does, and what prompted you to start the business in the first place.
Yeah, I have financially planned for over 30 years and predominantly specialised in insurance. And obviously, as we know, with insurance, health issues cause you to be able to get the best policy at the time. And if your health is not the greatest, you take what you're able to get, and there's not a perfect world out there. My belief in that process was being able to get the right product that you needed, making sure that it stayed in force, and then making sure that the promise, because that's basically what you're buying, is a promise from an insurance company that they're going to pay money when you suffer the circumstances that you're covered for, that they're going to pay you out. And in doing this, I became very much aware that people didn't structure their estates and a whole lot of information that was required that they were going to get around to it, or they just hadn't even considered that they needed. And we started to back then to run the estate planning process because I thought, well, I'm going to be in helping them with their estates in the event of their death. I think I better get these areas, as I'm aware of them, sorted out beforehand than trying to fluff around after the fact. So that's where we started off. And we've now gone into the niche of making sure that people's estates are done correctly and in a modern way. And that's where we've rolled it out.
Interesting, interesting. One of the things that surprised me, well, it didn't, in our previous conversations, was just how many people don't really think about the management of their estate once they pass and they're no longer with us, and they've got this perception that having a will fixes everything. You know, so perhaps you can talk to us for a minute on, you know, why do you need to plan your estate if you've got a will?
Yeah, that's a good question. Most people do think, and that's probably because that has been pushed for so long and is a very important document to have, but it doesn't cover everything. So there's certain aspects of our lives that are not taken into consideration with the will. So your superannuation, for example, that is outside of your estate, unless it's brought into the estate, and there's certain forms and documentation that need to be done to maintain that. Or if you've got companies and trust structures and these sorts of things, they're also outside of the estate. So most people are thinking that, yep, I've got a will, I've done the hard work, I'm okay. But as you said, no, they're not. And with technology and the way that we're moving forward and our lives are changing, things like cryptocurrencies and online assets and these sorts of things are now also not necessarily being covered under wills. So being able to make sure that all of your assets are dealt with and that you're actually pre-planning for what you want to happen in the event of you not being able to be here and continue what you've started off.
So interesting that you hit on that, technology. And as we all know, technology is rapidly changing our world. I mean, look at us here having a chat on Zoom, which is going to be broadcast at the virtual expo, and people are watching this at the moment. Well, at their moment, but pre-recorded for us. Is just one example of how communications technology is changing. You mentioned crypto, but tell us a little bit more about companies and trusts, because most of the people that are going to watch this presentation are likely to have their own business.
Yeah.
So perhaps expand a little bit about that in terms of what sort of considerations do you need to take into account when it comes to your business?
Yeah, good point. It because once again, people, I think a lot of people forget the point that you are basically running a business as, and I always used to say to people, it's like a baby. You're taking care of it. You're making sure it's healthy and is in good shape and being looked after, but you don't actually own it. And that's an interesting thing with companies is as a director, you're running it. There's a set of rules and guidelines of what you're meant to be doing within a company. And when you're no longer there, you then obviously need to be able to bring in other directors that can then run it. You would have shareholders that may be family, especially in a family business. That may be yourself as well, but it also may be family. And ideally, you're looking at that business continuing and growing. So the fact that you're not able to continue at the reins, you then need the right people. And it's always very interesting when you've got partnerships, for example, within a company or even just a straight partnership, is that in death, so many people end up finding that they have a hostile partner. So, for example, if you've got somebody who's in partnership with you and either one go, their partners then become the owners of their shares. And you may have a situation if they're within the business, it's not a major issue. But if they've not had any part to play and if they're not actively day to day in the business, then they're going to be looking at it to, okay, I got an income off that. It was an asset and has a value, but I wasn't actually doing anything there. So the other partner then going to go, now my work level's increased because the partner that I was working with is now deceased. And what are we doing? How do we bring in new blood? How do we bring in new people to be able to take over those roles? Because you tend to find people specialize in particular areas and they take what their niches are. And that also then can affect the company because that person that was very good at something is no longer there to provide that service and to do that activity. And it starts to affect the company, which affects the bottom line. So
Yeah.
those are the sort of areas when you start to have trust structures and these sorts of things, you're doing that for a whole lot of reasons, whether it be taxation or asset protection or making sure that you're protected and it's going to go, what you're building is going to go through to the people that you want it to in the event of something going wrong.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny you should mention that. I mean, several years ago, a friend of mine, he was in partnership. His partner was involved in a road accident and didn't survive. But his non-surviving business partner's wife, who hadn't had a direct involvement in the business, all of a sudden wants to become very hands-on. And ultimately, that friction and some of the ideas that she had ended up with the company folding.
Yeah, yeah. And that's really sad because of the work and effort and everything that was put into it due to poor planning that is what tends to sometimes happen. The other thing is that people will then try and sell, and the interesting part is that you tend to see the vultures running around and trying to buy it for very little cents in the dollar on a business that is worth it, but people just do not realise.
Yeah.
I remember one client that I had that had a trucking company, and when he passed, he was involved in an accident. The wife was sort of a little bit involved, but all of a sudden these invoices for fuel all over the countryside were coming in, and she wasn't aware of whether it was genuine or not. So she just kept paying it and paying it, and most of what he put in protection ended up getting used in all of this areas. Um, it just becomes very sad because what you intended to happen due to an accident tend to not go the way that everybody thought it might do.
Yeah, definitely. So tell me then, Mal, in terms of the way that Safe and Sound Estate operates.
Yep.
How does your approach make the whole estate planning process less painful for families, smoother?
Yep. The way that we do things differently is that in most cases, the general process of what people do is they get a will. They may have an enduring power of attorney, and these are two very important documents, but they're very specific for what they actually do. And once again, a lot of people are confused as to what they actually do or where they form the part. And then you have other things like, health directives and that sort of thing, which tend to come in more in later in life. People are thinking that, I don't need to worry about that until we're much older. That, depending on circumstances, may or may not be the case. But a lot of the areas that people don't take into consideration and are not necessarily brought into it is where you're looking for. So, for example, I had a client the other day that in going through the process, she came up with 74 different websites that she uses on a regular basis with login codes, with activation, and some of those can span over the last 10 or 20 years, where you've changed different email addresses, or you've got different email addresses as the ability to reactivate or to change passwords and authentication. So that was just one part that she was not aware. So to answer your question, our process goes through, it's broken up into 3 areas, and it takes up to 12 months to get into place. The first part is your personal information and your personal assets. So you're then looking at, okay, in the event of something happening, who's going to be my executor? Who's my next of kin? Who are the family members that I've got? Dates of birth and that sort of thing. Who are the close friends and who are the family that I would want notified in the event of something happening? And you're then picking up your professionals. So once again, a lawyer will come through and work out who do you want in the will, but that's it. So assets, 100% of the will, you want assets to go through to these people, that's it. Nobody's thinking about who do I want notified, who my mate, that I went to school with and I'm still in contact with. Not a regular basis, but every time we catch up, we just seem to click in and we're back into where we were last time. Who are the social groups that we're running around with? Who are my professionals? My accountant, my lawyers, my dentists, doctors, and any other professionals that I use in my day-to-day running of my life and those sorts of areas. As an individual, you'll know who you're using, but your spouse or if the kids are then trying to sort things out because circumstances have gone the way that hasn't quite planned, it is very challenging and very difficult, and that's where the cost of doing an estate tends to escalate. It's because then people have to start to look and source things, and when you start to have to search out, that costs money because it's time. So we have all of this documented in a nice, consistent way, whether you want it in a paper form or whether you want it into electronic form. And then, so once you've got all that, it's easy to maintain that and keep it up to date. The next part is with you into the business side of things. So taking into consideration your business structures, your trust structures, and all of those sort of areas, and who's the beneficiaries and what sort of trusts they are, and what you want to happen with those, and how you then start to facilitate and protect what it is that you've got, so that you're starting to pre-plan who's going to be the director, who's going to be the trustee of the respective trust, who's capable, and who do I want and trust. And then the last area is picking up the values and realistically what makes you you. At the end of the day, once again, as we move on in life and things slowly change, you have children, you want to empower them with your values and with what your beliefs and everything. We all want to get around and say certain things, but we don't get a chance, or it's not the right time. This is an area where you can start to put down your thoughts and what you would like to be noted, and you know, particular members know what you're thinking and what you've done. It also helps to be able to give indication so that you can minimize the disputes. Because at the end of the day, I've had so many cases where you'll have a child that has distanced itself, and there's been the relationship has been non-existent or very rocky, and people have certain views. And the interesting thing is that everybody at the end of the day has a belief of something's going to happen, and sometimes it doesn't quite go the way they wanted it to. And this is where you get a lot of the wills that are contested. And the number of cases where a will is contested and the actual people that are contesting it actually come out winning is quite high. Mm-hmm. So once again, that tends to put a sour taste in people's mouths, because they go, well, I've gone to the trouble of doing my will. What was the point? Because it's not being followed, and somebody decided to contest it, and the courts have agreed, and now where I wanted the money to go to is not necessarily going that way. So once again, a lot of pre-planning, a lot of preparation in making sure that these sort of things are in the way that you want them to be, plus also are updated and continually evolving with your life as that evolves and changes.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the people watching this at the moment are starting to think, oh my God, there is a lot to this, which underscores the importance of having someone on your team that understands the dynamics of all of this, as your people and yourself obviously do. Because let's face it, I mean, you're organizing this sort of thing on a daily basis. You know all the things to look for. You know the pitfalls that are likely to be faced, and knowing them in advance allows people to plan their estate better. Because, I think a lot of people are in this do-it-yourself mode because they can. But whether they should is another thing entirely, because at the end of the day, you don't know what you don't know. And a mistake in this area can be absolutely devastating.
Yep, yep. And the other thing too is that a lot of people, because they don't know what they don't know, they're looking at the cost and they think, well, things are very expensive. What we provide is not that expensive. But the issue is that if you don't do something, on the average estate, you could be saving yourself somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000 in having the information easily accessible to your executor, as opposed to lawyers having to go and find it. And that's the sort of costings that, and then you have any of the contestants and somebody else, all of those costs are coming out of the estate. And the more money you have in the estate, the more that people are out there for it. And it just, at the end of the day, not being mean, but the lawyers are the ones that make out of this. They do a job that's needed, but if things were planned and prepared a lot better, therefore they wouldn't need to do as much. And that was an interesting comment that I used to always get from lawyers and law firms, as they go, Malk, you know more current information on our clients than we do. Right. And it's just a matter of bringing it up to date, making sure that it's accurate, and giving them the areas where they can lead into to be able to then start to work out and structure what is needed to be done.
Yeah. So from your perspective, at what age do you think people should sensibly start considering estate planning?
Well, my view is that anybody over the age of 18. But in saying that, once again, the right people, if you're wanting to do things and you're starting to think along that line, then you should be doing it. The interesting thing with the younger generation is that they think, well, I've got nothing. What assets have I got? But in saying that, everybody's got superannuation. Everybody's probably got insurances and that sort of thing. And everybody's got a value or belief of what they would like to happen. They just sit with, it's going to be a long time. It's not likely to happen to me. I'm okay. But once again, the normal milestones in that sort of situation, getting into a relationship, having children, starting a business, buying your first home, buying your first investment property. All these sort of areas are triggered to go, oh, hang on, I should be starting to do things. Uh, it's the best time to start it is when you of the mind, yep, I think I need to do these things and it's on my mind. At any stage, you need to it's a good stage. I mean, at the end of the day, we're not saying any particular age because some people, if you don't believe in it or you think you're okay, that's your reality. And there's enough people out there that we can help without trying to twist arms and that sort of thing. So the milestones or people going through are a little triggered to be able to go, yep, maybe I should be doing this. But at the end of the day, any like they say, when's the best time to plant a tree? Today.
Yeah.
If today goes, well, it's tomorrow. You've got a way. The interesting part about this is that the government does have a plan B for you. So if you were to die or if you were to be incapacitated, the government does have a plan B that will work. It's just whether it's going to take into consideration what you believe should happen and the way that you would like things. If you're happy with their plan B, then you're covered. If you're not happy with their plan B, then make your plan A, and then you're covered again.
Yeah, that's definitely. I think it is about control, isn't it? It's about making sure that your legacy, whatever that shape that is in your mind, is actually acted upon. And unfortunately, for far too many people, and as you've already pointed out, just having a will isn't enough to guarantee your legacy. Because people have all sorts of interpretations and there are all sorts of issues that can arise, but with a proper estate plan, it really dots the I's and crosses the T's, where the will tends to leave that sort of stuff alone.
Yeah, and it all. I mean, I'm just thinking while you were. I mean, I had an example where a particular person had a GT Ford, a very valuable car, 1971, lovely vehicle. Now that was left to his son. So the will was set up. If something happened to me, I want the car kept, and that's going to my son. The trouble was that when he passed, the child was very young, so still under the age of 18, and it was quite some considerable time before he did reach 18. Now, what wasn't taken into consideration with the instructions that were put into the will was that, okay, what are we doing with the car between the child's age now and when he reaches 18? So you have a very valuable asset that needs to be stored somewhere safely and in the best condition. It needs to be insured. It needs to be maintained. And who's doing that? Because a child now has it in trust for them until they reach 18. None of this was taken into consideration, and the funding to maintain the asset wasn't taken into consideration as well. So it became very messy from what seemed like a simple request and instructions of, if something happened to me, it's going to go to junior, but nothing was taken into consideration of how that's going to happen and what the implementation of what's going through to be able to have it happen.
Yeah, good point. Good point. And I think that really hits home. I can almost hear the papers rustling now of all those people checking out their wills to see what detail they might have missed. But in terms of starting this journey for estate planning, and from the sounds of it, Mal, it is a journey. It's not just a point in time. It is going to go, from woe to go, so to speak. What would you recommend as the first, say, 2 or 3 steps in starting that journey?
Well, start to document what you actually have. So if you're sitting there, I mean, if you've got a will, that's great. Look at what you've got in that will, and then also then look outside of the other areas that you've got. So if you're sitting with companies and structures, okay, where are they sitting at? And you start to form a list of what it is that you've actually got then. Then you're sitting there and thinking, well, okay, so what would I want to happen to this? if something happened to me last night, what would be the implications of that, and what would actually happen? And am I comfortable with that, or do I need to start to structure or document certain areas, or note what is going to happen or where things are? It's always interesting in a couple situation because you may have one person that is heavily hands-on in that area and the other person's not. Now, the interesting fact is if that person that's hands-on goes, then that other person is lost and is totally in the darkness. And even if the one that goes that is not the one that's hands-on, the other person is then dealing with grief and a process that you don't deal with every day, and you don't think straight. I mean, if you talk to anybody, they say, some of the most traumatic things are a death in the family and these sorts of things. So being able to have the time to be able to have the support around and the guidance to take you through that process is very important. And the difficult part with just having a will is that a law firm or a lawyer has drawn it up. There's your document. Okay, we'll start to implement that. And what do you want done? And it basically questions back to you or decisions that are just being made for you to meet the requirements of legal or taxation or selling up to be able to then pass on the funds to be able to go to who the beneficiaries are. So I would start with, if somebody was thinking about that, to start to write down what they're thinking, what their issues are. I'd also suggest that they reach out to somebody like ourselves to be able to go through that process with them, to be able to then start to look at what it is that they actually want and how, and the implications of what and how they do things, and be able to then make sure that the right decisions are going to suit what they want. Unfortunately, there's no perfect world out there, but at least if you've started to put into place and look at the pros and cons in your decisions and choices, you're then able to brainstorm and come up with the best that's going to work for you.
Great. So if people do want to reach out and contact you, Mal, what's the best way to do that?
They can, we've got safeandsoundestate@gmail.com as the email address. My mobile number, 0416 24 7070. Those are the two areas. We're on Facebook under Safe and Sound Estate Business Planning. So there's a page on there that I'm putting a lot of information up and on what and how. So case studies and issues that I'm seeing within the market, and then what you can do to start to solve those problems. So, yeah.
Great, great. Well, Mal, thanks very much for your time today. Lots of really interesting and valuable information. And for those watching, please take some action. Even if it's only to make a diary note in your schedule further down the track to action this, or at least start that journey. And as Mal mentioned, probably a good place to start just to have a conversation and some pointers is to make contact with Mal at Safe and Sound Estate Planning. Either on Facebook through that Gmail address or direct on his mobile. Mal, thanks again for your time and for the information, very valuable information you've provided.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay.